Good morning. My name is Ely Wick, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about this podcast. Kind of a synopsis, if you will, an introduction. What I'd like for you to gain from listening, the inspiration for it, and also to introduce myself. I'm an artist, an avid, borderline obsessive book lover all my life, a professional tattoo artist for the past 17 years, and books have always been my biggest inspiration in my life as an artist, ever since I first picked up a book and first laid pencil to paper. I've wanted to create a book club for years, but those of you that have tried this know of the hardships involved, the complexities of people, time, and schedules. So this is my contribution to the book community, to give back to the books that have changed my life. Forevermore, the book club, a podcast book club for those that have always shared the same dream and want to share their experiences in the world of beautiful books. Hi, welcome back. So kind of a brief synopsis of what to expect from this podcast. It's for book lovers and artists alike. Kind of like cliff notes, like a basic summary of the book itself, an overview, kind of relive the book itself, character insights, a little bit about the author, book recommendations, and then thought-provoking questions one might be left with. It's really meant to inspire picking up a good book and being able to talk about it with loved ones, even commiserating the hardships and void brought on by finishing a really good book, and the art inspired by it, kind of mourning it, if you will. This is kind of the raw, unfiltered epithet of the books we love. Our book club, forever a safe place, bringing people together with a profound love for books and the art that inspires us, from the mind of an artist and fellow book lover, Ely Wick, me. So I will introduce myself and hope to kind of paint the picture for you so that we may become friends. I so want to be your book friend, the one you call up for a good cup of coffee and we sit and we have a cigarette and we just kind of talk about books for hours on end and relate them to life and ask all of the questions. Too many times have I finished a good book and was left to mourn alone, or have gotten that glazed over look from friends. And I love the ones that never once gave me that look, even though it wasn't their flavor of coffee. You know what I mean? So, in my grief, I've decided to reach out to others to be that book friend, to offer my condolences and love in that moment, one book at a time. So I'm gonna just kind of jump into it, kind of an introduction, how I came across my profound love for books. I fell in love with books around the same time I first picked up a pencil. Earliest book I remember ever reading, other than looking at cartoons in the newspaper, and the first time I picked up a Far Side in the bathroom while potty training, other than that, is maybe the first grade, maybe around 6 or 7. It was scary stories to tell in the dark, and then it was Goosebumps, And then Edgar Allan Poe was really the first book, like first novel, first poetry. And then it kind of just progressed from there. I will always advocate scary stories for my affinity for horror. I will say there's a lot of horror books I read, but there's other contributing factors to it as well. Like, I was impossibly shy and super weird little girl, very quiet, very observant. Think of the girl from maybe The Ring. Just really weird. I was a really weird girl. But we moved around a lot. I was from a military family, and I never really felt like I belonged anywhere. And I didn't really find my voice until adulthood, right around when I started tattooing, actually. So that's the other reason for the podcast, is that I feel like that's a huge step into finding that voice and inspiring others to find their voice. So it's funny, yeah. Drawing kind of helped me, gave me a voice, and reading taught me how to have a voice, to relate to the characters in this world an author created, so much like an artist to a canvas. These people in these books became my friends, my heroes. I could travel the world and know I wasn't alone, and I found so much of who I am through that. Kind of a backstory. I'm a complete introvert. I always have a book on me at any point. It actually causes me incredible anxiety to not have a book. And I'm also a natural empath, so it's important for me to have that moment anywhere I go. I'm very quiet. And it's funny, it's actually a big hurdle that I have to overcome during the podcast, which is kind of tricky, but I feel like it might actually get me over that fear. I'm an artist. Mostly I draw and paint and sculpt and sew, and I make soap and aftercare. I'm a professional tattoo artist by trade, going on 17 years. And I'm a co-owner of FOREVERMORE tattoo company in Maryland. And funny enough, like, tattooing really did save my life in so many ways. Like, I don't know where I would be without it. I currently live on a mountain in a cabin in the forests of West Virginia with a slew of animals that I rescued over the years. I'm originally from Washington State, but I've lived all over the country and somehow landed in Maryland. And I just bought the cabin maybe 2 years ago. I have my master's degree in art therapy and a bachelor's in psychology and fine art. Originally, I really wanted to help military veterans with PTSD and trauma-based therapy, and clients with Alzheimer's and dementias through art. I wanted to help them learn how to find their voice. I wanted to help them express and cope and, find themselves through that. And I think something's really powerful about that. And there's so many things that can help people through expressing themselves, whether or not it's painting a picture or writing a really good book, or fuck it, start a podcast or a YouTube channel, or where things are now. I was kind of following that life path, and I was tattooing throughout school, and balancing tattooing with college. And one day I got into an argument with a professor, actually, about transference, and it changed my life forever. And it was that very moment where I realized I was doing everything I was meant to be doing through tattooing and really helping people. And I don't even want to get started on the concept of insurance or finding a therapist or finding someone that just fits you just right. It's so correlated with tattooing. It's magnificent, actually, because uniquely tattooing, it can apply to anybody and everybody. And I feel like, everybody needs someone to talk to. You know what I mean? Everybody just wants to be heard. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has a profound voice. It's so much like a really good book, where it's kind of funny. One of my friends, actually, we were talking about the concept of like afterlife and what that meant for her, and we were having a good cup of coffee, and it became a conversation of how she viewed heaven was the idea that it's just an enormous library full of books, and that each person had their own unique book, and that there's no such thing as a bad book. You know what I mean? That everything, it's kind of just these characters going through this life, and how magnificent and strong, and like their subtle nuances that make them who they are. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And I see so much of people in that thought, and books themselves, you know what I mean? It's not even books that you didn't really like. There's kind of like a personal perspective of, what you didn't like about it. Like, everybody recommends Catcher in the Rye, but I read it as an adult accidentally. You know what I mean? I'm sure as a pre-adolescent I would have loved this character, but as an adult I'm like, who is this fucking little snot? You know what I mean? But totally, genuinely, from an adult perspective, I don't have kids. You know what I mean? I don't plan on having children. I love children. But that specific character, but he's a good dude. He was going through a lot in his life, you know what I mean? He needed a voice. Like, the book gave him his voice, and I'm not criticizing him for his unique voice, and I can appreciate that, you know what I mean? It was still a really beautiful book for that, but my perspective was a little skewed. So kind of, I want to give you an idea of how to perceive me and how to envision me. Kind of picture me as that eccentric raccoon friend. You're walking around the forest and you find a raccoon that's reading a book, and you're like, hey, little raccoon buddy, that's a good fucking book. What do you think? You know what I mean? What do you think about it? And then the raccoon just kind of goes on a diatribe about how much he loves his book. I would be the raccoon. Another way, maybe I'm that weird aunt you might have met once that lives out on her own in a cabin deep in the forest. She grows her own food and makes soap, always covered in paint, and has a plethora of rescued animal friends that follow her around everywhere, and ravens that she's befriended. Maybe that one art teacher with dreads that always has a cup of coffee and that occasionally mistakes it for her rinse cup. a Frankie from Grace and Frankie. I could be your Frankie, that weird hippie arty bookish friend where her walls are devoted entirely to art and books. A constant struggle in my life, if there were only more walls, more wall space, that would be awesome. That one friend that always talks about this bear, Greg, or her pet squirrel she takes care of, that's somehow still alive. This squirrel could be like 20 or 30. I don't know. That artist lady in Kiki's Delivery Service. Yeah, her in a Ghibli film. And then like cross that with Frankie. Yeah. That'd probably be me. All of that. I think that sums it up pretty well. And I want to paint a picture so that way when you listen to it, you can kind of see us just hanging out, just come up and envision you're in the forest and have a good cup of coffee and a comfortable chair sitting out on a porch. Kind of just talking to your friend about this amazing book. And I so hope by reaching out through this medium that it can really reach a lot of people. And I think that would be really cool. Like, there's been so many times that I really have felt so alone, and I don't want that for other people. I want us to have this together. I want this to be a place that you can come and be like, oh, look, there's an episode about it, or there's an episode about Stephen King, or Chuck Palahniuk, or this book that you really love. And let's say, either you're interested in reading it and you don't really want to invest that time without knowing a little bit more about it. This would be the podcast for you. This will be kind of like an introduction to the books. Like, there will be spoiler alerts, but I'll make sure to include that in each episode. But also, if you wanted to do a book report, that would be awesome. This would be a really good show for you. Also, even if you read the book already and you say it's been years and you kind of forget, it's kind of hazy, this is a really good way to kind of relive that book all over again. To revisit the characters like you knew you loved it. I will always opt to read a book or listen to podcasts about books than watch a movie. So I kind of hope that I can create that for you. Like, I really do hope that I can create something that when you need a book friend, you can tune into this and we can sit down together. I think that would be really special. I think that's what more people really need. I wish there was a way to give people more of a voice and to feel heard. I think that's so incredibly important. I'm kind of going to go over some of my favorite authors and books and genres, just to give you like an idea. I feel like most people kind of read or listen, I guess, this introduction to kind of give you an idea for the flavor of the podcast. So I would say it will be a lot of horror. It'll be a lot of like psychological thriller. With some combination of fiction, like a lot of art, travel, kind of like a broad spectrum. Um, it makes me laugh. It's, oh man, it's a hard question. The answer is like, what is your favorite book? And, or like, who is your favorite author? Like, what is that? What is that question? Like, good introductory question, but it should be more or less be like, what are you currently reading? What book caused you to make a scene in public? What book broke your heart into a million pieces? And what book allowed you to love reading again? What author do you look up most to? What would you like to experience in a good book? For authors that I gravitate most to, I'd have to say Stephen King. He's my comfort author. If I'm going through a hard time in life, I'll always seem to pick up one of his books that I've read 3 or 4 times already and just dive into his world to learn to overcome hardships and work through any fears I might have. He does a great job with like a basic scenario and then writing an entire novel on that scenario, like A Little Girl Lost in the Woods, or a mother and a child stuck in a hot car with a rabid dog. You know what I mean? Like everyday scenarios. And his characters end up coming out so strong from it. And I also have to say Chuck Palahniuk. He's my uncomfortable author. When I'm in need of humor and to feel comfortable in the fact of knowing that my life is somewhat in line in comparison to like some of his stories, they're ridiculous. I love him so much, and I'm so happy to have ridiculousness captured in literature. There's been too many serious moments where in the back of my mind something will remind me of one of his stories, and I'll have the biggest shit-eating grin on my face and can't help but laugh a little bit, and everybody's very serious and around me at that current moment, and I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that he could provide that for me. B.C. Andrews. Oh man. Incest. Anyone? Yes. Humility. Letting go. Yes. Generational trauma. For sure. Family and the complexities of that word, what that means. That would be the author for you. Yes. Edgar Allan Poe. Always and forever. My first love. Some of my favorite books, I'd have to say Do McKee. Kind of this ideal life, completely eradicated by a horrible accident where he gets mutilated, and then he turns into the psychic that kind of makes his drawings come to life. And just ridiculousness ensues. But I really, that's one of my favorites. I probably read that 8 or 9 times. Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. Funny, short stories about authors living together in a dilapidated old house. And there's just this one story about pearl diving for semen by this little adolescent boy that finds out about masturbation, and he just can't help it. He's just going ham everywhere. But he ultimately, ridiculously, ends up kind of disemboweling himself accidentally in a pool because of a jet, and then he's forever like 60 pounds underweight because he essentially had to cut off like, I don't know, maybe 3 feet of his colon. I'm not sure. Ridiculous though, but like really, really good. Secret Life of Bees taught me about trauma, to grow up with this insane guilt that haunts you for killing your mother, what it means to grow up without a mother. Amazing little girl. Mice and Men. I cried hysterically at work. It was a mess. I was not emotionally prepared for George and Lenny's moment with the rabbits. Completely broke my heart. Taught me what love really was. I was no good for like a week. Awful. And I was all by myself too. Like, I'm crying hysterically. Like, people don't know how to react or what to say. And they're like, what are you doing? Why did this book? Yeah. So I want for this podcast to be somewhere that, say you just finished this book, say you just, that happened with George and Lenny, and you're just mourning, you're hysterical. Oh, look at this podcast. I would like you to find it and see that in Mice and Men and, talk about it. And I'd like to grieve with you. I want to grieve with you about this moment because it's intense and it's life-changing and it's altering and it's awful and no one talks about it. I'd like to be that for you. I'd like to, be your book friend. That's what a book friend is there for. Yeah, a little bit more about this podcast. If you're still listening, and mind you, it's totally okay if you got like a minute in and you're like, this is not for me. Totally okay. I do not expect anybody in their right mind to listen to it at all. Even if I had 0, I would be like, that's okay. Just from the simple fact that surprisingly what inspired doing this in the first place was reading It by Stephen King, and it was phenomenal and beautiful and complex, and there was no one I could share it with. I couldn't share this beautiful book with someone, and I feel like that's part of it. Like books are so much like art where, yes, you can hoard it, you can keep it for yourself, but I think for me personally, I think a big part of books and a big part of art is that they're both meant to be shared. I think they're both meant to evoke more questions and answers. I think that they're really meant to be shared with people. I think that something's really beautiful about that. And surprisingly, this has kind of offered a chance for me to grieve thoroughly between this introduction, but mainly with being able to talk about the book after. And I hope that it can inspire you too, like whether or not it's to pick the book up or, open up a dialogue with a friend and you guys both found out you read it. Oh my God, that's the best moment. That's why I want to be your raccoon friend, because I would lose my shit and remember forever if I ran into a raccoon and then we both found out we loved the same book. Some of my best friends I have ever met in my entire life, at some point in a conversation, we both found out we loved a book, a certain book that we both read. I think a couple of times there was like the Sookie Stackhouse series, and then, oh man, the Game of Thrones books. The Peculiar Children, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children was one of the best book series I've ever read. And like me and a friend, we were essentially strangers, but we bonded so intensely over that book. One night, it was like 2:00 in the morning. Yeah, I think that's a really special moment, and I feel like I wish everybody had that more often in their life, and I'm really hopeful that this can be that for you. Also, think of this kind of as an outlet to cope with finishing a good book, and all that you've learned from it and what I've learned from it. And I want to share that with you if you have the spoons for it. Like if you have the energy for it. That's what I love about podcasts, is that I feel like if you're not feeling it today, it's totally okay. You can turn it off. You can tune it out. I feel like podcasts are kind of the weirdest, beautiful balance of being an introvert, having a conversation, but having the option to not have that conversation right then and then, that moment. You know what I mean? You can save it for later and be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna have some coffee. This is podcast time, and hang out, or I'm gonna drive to work, or maybe clean my house, and just listen to this book about this woman that slowly loses her mind in this room, in this house, in this old Victorian manor. I think it's really cool, and I'm really glad that you can be a part of this journey with me. And it's totally okay if you choose not to, Yeah, it's just kind of this passion project that I've had for a while. And I feel like podcasting actually would be a good avenue for it in a lot of ways. So, yeah, that concludes our introduction episode. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this journey today. And just know that it means a lot to me that you were able to take your time and be a part of this with me. I'm really grateful. I so hope you have a really beautiful day, and with lots of incredible moments, and some laughter, maybe a good wholesome cry. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.